BDELL 101.
Be Frankie.
Yeah, I'm striving for greatness, trying to make it out. We're stuck in the matrix. Yeah, I'm striving for greatness, trying to make it out. We're stuck in the matrix. Yeah, I'm striving for greatness, trying to make it out. We're stuck in the matrix. Yeah, I'm striving for greatness, trying to make it out. We're stuck in the matrix.
Hold on for a second. All right. We're going to wait till we get about 500 in the chat before we get started with the transmission. If you're new to this channel, hit that like button, hit that share button, hit that subscribe button, and hit that notification bell. We're going to wait till we get about 500 in the chat before we get started, because the time that we're living in right now, it's all about two different timelines. There's two different diametrical timelines that's taking place on the planet right now, and we're finna break it down today. So share the live, hit that subscribe button. We finna get straight to it today. And then at the end, I'm gonna do a live Q&A also. So all the questions that's correlated to the timeline that we're in right now, you can ask me. So, all right, we got about 684 people in the chat. So tonight's transmission, the basis of it is going to be talking about the end of the pontification period of the dark priesthood, the Vatican of Popes of Rome. So the symbolization of the death of the Pope is actually acclimated to the fall of Satan's kingdom. And Satan's kingdom is a personification of the corporation, the corporate jurisdiction that took us out of our sovereign capacity. So one thing you got to understand about the Vatican, right? One thing you got to understand about the Vatican holds all the secrets of the esoteric knowledge that belongs to us as indigenous people. So his death is also the symbology of the freeing of the liberated people, as what you're talking about, the Semitic people of the Bible, or the indigenous Negro, right? Who are the indigenous Mers. I told you, when you go to the 1848 Supreme Court decision on June 6th, it says that the geographical landmass of America belongs to the title holders of the land who are connected to the 5 civilized tribes, right? When you're talking about the Seminole Indians, which means fugitive slave. And the only ones that was fugitive slave during that time period were the ones who became prisoners of war by way of the religion, right? Because like I said in the video on TikTok today, the church and the state is not separate. They work in synergy because they use it to keep you out of your sovereign capacity. When you go to the G3526 Strong Concordance, Christian translates to the word black. That's connected to the 1724 Black Christian codes. And those Christian codes is acclimated to the jurisdiction under the Vatican, right? Which is why you don't have a nationality. You have a status of white or black or whatever nomenclature title that's connected to their caste system. Now, one thing you got to understand about the Pope been dead. His ass done died about 3 or 4 times already, right? But now they're trying to create this image of a prophetic divination. This prophetic divination is acclimated to their timeline. That's why it tells you in Revelation, I think it's Revelation 17, it talks about how the devil has a 6,000-year dominion on the planet, which is also correlated to the religion because their God is actually the devil, right? So one thing you got to understand about the Pope passing away during this time period, right after Easter, because they want to make it seem like he's a damn prophet when he's not, right? He died when Saturn was in conjunction with Venus during the North Node, right? That's what you got to understand, because Saturn is equated to Satan, who was Chronos, who was Father Time, that keeps you in a fixed position reality that's connected to their simulation. So now the veil is lifted, and now we're in that time period right now where you're going to seek true liberation as you have the rise of artificial intelligence, right? So we finna get straight to it, ladies and gentlemen. I'm finna get the presentation going because I don't want to talk too much. Sorry about that. We're going to go. If you're new to this channel, hit that subscribe button, ladies and gentlemen. see, make sure hold on. All right. Gonna get the presentation going. Hold on for a second, make sure I got my slides and everything right. Hold on for a second, guys. It's not showing it. All right. Hold on for a second. I'm getting it together. I hardly ever use this layout. All right. I think we got it now. Well, actually, we're going to do this. All right. Now, since we got it going, now the basis of this whole transmission is the fact that this is going to be the beginning points of the time of desolation when you're talking about the abomination of desolation that is connected to the seven thunders. Because one thing you got to understand about the fall of the church is the symbology of the resurrection of the Christ body who was acclimated to those who have those genes that's connected to the sun, right? Because they try to tell your ass that to go to church because they don't understand that the body is the true temple, it's the true Christ. It's the symbology of ascension, right? So the fall of the church is the resurrection of the Christ body, because one thing you got to understand about the carbon body in itself is photovoltaic, meaning that it has the ability to transmute light into bioelectricity, right? Because it's correlated to a Christ energy. That's how you propagate right knowledge. So it's not a coincidence that during this time period that the Pope, he died during the time of Easter, right? Because Easter is a part of the resurrection process of when you're talking about the Kundalini serpentine fire, right? Which is the regeneration spinal fire that hits the pineal gland that gives you a Christ consciousness. Because the fall of the church, like I said, the fall of the church is an emulation of the resurrection of the actual Christ body of who we are, right? Because just like you have 7 chakra systems, a cathedral at a church is basically set up like the Christ body that is not acclimated to the Canaanite. That's why you got to read this book right here called Blue-Eyed Beasts. It talks about the Canaanite factions, right? Hold on for a second. Now, one thing you got to understand about the Pope, his transition is basically the embodiment of a shift. We're in the Aquarian age right now, right? We're in the Aquarian age, which means that there's a transmutation process that's going to be taking place. So the Aquarian age, this is when you're going to see the fall of religion. And this is when you're going to see the other popes, as far as like the one that's going to be taking place in office, is going to be the revealing of the black nobility. And that's when you're going to get full disclosure about everything. Hold on for a second. All right. All right. We're going to do. Hold on for a second. Now we're going to get back to the presentation. All right. Now we're going to get back to the presentation. So you're talking about the resurrection of the Christ body. Now, the death of Pope Francis is basically a transitional shift that's going to be taking place that has an impact on the indigenous spirituality. So that's connected to who we are as indigenous people, because I told you, we are the geographical title holders of the geographical landmass of America for 1 million square miles that is equated to 640 million acres of land, right? And it tells you that in their documents, right? So the death of the Vatican Church is the return of the land that's connected to the indigenous people. Now I did the ancient Proto-Semitic Hebrew Vedic gematria number of Pope Francis that is equated to 404. When you get 44, when you go to the Illuminati card game. So everything that you see taking place on the planet right now is a form of prophetic divination by way of their simulation, right? Because the perception of art imitates reality. So that's how you know that the universe in itself is numerical. The simulation and everything is numerical, which is controlled by the dark priesthood of the Vatican Church that's connected to the dark factions on the dark side of the moon. Because I showed you in my last transmission when I was talking about the Pope, the prophecy of popes of 2027, is that the Pope, every priest and every Pope that they had inside the Vatican, they have a crater on the dark side of the moon because you're following lunar religions. The lunar doctrine is connected to the Piscean age, which is why you see he wears the hat of Dagon, because Dagon is an anagram for the word Gad, who was the false god of the Bible, who was Moloch. Right now, the Pope passed away at 88 years old, right? So I told you to watch this movie, Donnie Darko, right? Because it's all based on time traveling and interdimensional portals. In the movie, it says that in Donnie Darko, the rabbit's name is Frank, and he tells Donnie the world will end in 28 days, 6 hours, 42 minutes, and 12 seconds. That is equated to 88. And how many keys is on the keyboard? 88. Because the 288s is a representation of the two keys of the silver key and the golden key, the embodiment of the dualistic energies of the sun and the moon. When you talk about Jack and Boaz, as you get back to the galactic center. So Pope Francis, his transition at 88 signifies a new beginning in a new order in biblical numerology, right? So I told you, the perception of art imitates reality. So it's not a coincidence that he died at 88, because the 88 is a representation of the keys. There's 88 keys on the keyboard, right? That's not by accident. That's not a coincidence. Like I said, everything in the gematria system that's correlated to the binary code system of the matrix is numerical. Everything is numerical, and it operates on a numerical spectrum. Now, when you look at the keys, what I was telling you, the keys he had to unlock was an encryption over humanity, because this is where you weren't able to get your cosmic codes. Your cosmic codes is your magnetism. The carbon body is an electromagnetic generator and a light code transducer. It transduces light because the carbon body is photovoltaic. It turns light into bioelectricity that enhances your magic to where you become the Christ energy. So he had to unlock these keys, because the keys were the embodiment of the sigil of Baal or Baal, who was Moloch, who was Enlil, who was Dagon, the same entity when you follow all those monotheistic teachings, right? Even when you get into the Gnostic text. So this is why you're going to see the rise of artificial intelligence, because when he unlocks these keys, which is why he died at 88 years old, unlocking these keys is going to unlock your magnetism. This is the resurrection of the Christ body, right? When you're talking about the energy of Ophiuchus, the Kundalini serpent fire. Ophiuchus, when you look at the sigil of it, what does it show you? It shows you a man holding a serpent. That serpent is the rise of the Kundalini energy. And we in the 9th year, which is a snake year, right? So it's not a coincidence that all this stuff is taking place on the planet right now. That's what you got to understand. So you got to watch this movie called Ninth Gate, because the keys unlocks the Christ body, the Ninth Gate. This movie, very old movie. There's a lot of gems in it. And the great majority of the information in the movie is actually lined up to what's taking place in real time right now. So when you get on Tubi, you always got to use places like Tubi as a catalyst to get the true information, because a lot of these books is not going to show you what's going to be taking place. You got to start watching movies and then applying the knowledge along with the movies, right? Because they already know what time it is, right? They already know what time it is. And then I told you that the Pope is also correlated to the devil coming from the bottomless pit that is controlled by Satan, because the Pope Francis was the personification of the 8th king that is equated to 88. So this is where you break out of the artificial time analysis mechanism that was connected to religion. Chronos, Father Time, who is Satan, right? So when you look at the number 8 is an infinity symbol. They want to keep you stuck in this artificial loop. It keeps you stuck in a loop because it's connected to reincarnation cycles, right? In order to break from the reincarnation cycle, you got to step away from the church. And the church is starting to fall, but you're still going to have NPCs and low vibrational ass people going to still try to go Easter egg hunting and all this other shit, knowing they ass know that rabbits don't lay no damn eggs, right? So the fall of religion is going to be the beginning points of the fall of everything on the planet, because the religion was basically the super glue to the simulation, right? Now I'm going to show you a video real quick. I'm going to show you a video real fast, and then we're going to get back to the presentation. All right. Well, all right. Now I'm going to show you a video for a second.
After Pope Francis,
which left him hospitalized for 38 days. He was the first.
The church needs to be appointed in what is truly a deeply symbolic process.
We want to show you some extraordinary pictures which came to us from the Vatican on what was, of course, an extraordinary day. Within hours of Pope Benedict announcing that he was to resign, take a look at this. Lightning struck St. Peter's Basilica. You can see it again now in...
I want you to read this at the bottom right here. The world will not be destroyed by those who do evil, but rather by those who watch them without doing anything to stop them. Job chapter 9, verse 24. Ephesians chapter 6, verse 12. The world be given to the hands of the wicked, and there's wickedness in high places. The world be given to the hands of the wickedness, and there's wickedness in high places. And who is the wicked people? Those who control the Vatican, who control the religion, right? But none of this is going to make sense to a motherfucker who is stuck and confined to a box, right? I told you the box is the suprachiasmatic nucleus. They want to keep you acclimated to the VMAT2 gene, which is the vesicular monomind transporter 2 gene, to where you're boxed in and believing things outside of yourself. I told you the 88 of him dying was the unlocking the cosmic codes of the silver key and the golden key when we get back to the galactic center where human becomes God, which is Apophis, right? So this is the resurrection of the 144,000 who you talking about, the chosen ones, the ones that were the black sheep in their family, to come back to resurrect the energy and revitalize their bloodline. That's what this is all about. And those that's connected to the land by birthright, right? Because all this is correlated to the socio-political aspect of civics also. So I'm going to keep playing the video, and then we're going to get back to the transmission.
In slow motion. Extraordinary. It happened just before 6 o'clock in the evening, local time.
Yeah, that's right, David. Extraordinary that Pope Francis died at the holiest.
And at the same time, you got Klaus Schwab. He just stepped down from the World Economic Forum, right? Because shit about to hit the fan.
Time of the year for Catholics, and I think people here they cannot see past that symbolism. It's an extraordinarily important moment for Catholics.
The surprise election in 2013 would mark a more radical break with the past than many expected.
With the health of Pope Francis deteriorating over recent years, conversations have already been had about who might lead the Catholic Church. A number of names have been put forward as possible candidates to become the next pontiff.
The Pope had been recovering, as you know, from double pneumonia, which left him hospitalized for 38.
See, his ass been dead. I told you, even that interview he did with J.D. Vance, that was a hologram. All this shit that they doing with artificial intelligence, and you mean to believe that they can do all this other stuff with all these robots and this technology, but you think that they can't create a hologram to make it seem like they talking to, Pope Francis during the interview? They just came out with a movie of Michael B. Jordan who looked like he really had a twin. So what makes you think they can't have that same technology when they demonstrate that to the masses on national television, right? So that's why I said, you got to understand, you got to read between the lines. You got to read beyond the tricknology. His ass been dead about 3 or 4 times. I think Rockefeller, he had about, 5 black people's hearts in his body. So like I said, it could be one of them things too, right?
8 days. He was the first Jesuit pope and the first pope from Latin America, a reformer guiding the Catholic Church in a new direction. Leaders around the world are paying tribute. President Trump calling him a good man who loved the world.
Now on the day of his passing, I think the thing to remember is it's all about Easter. Just think about this. He passed away the day after Easter, and he gave a speech yesterday, even though he couldn't speak. He had.
So you also got to understand that the Pope is the viscera of all religion, of all 3 monotheistic religions that's connected to Freemasonry, right? Because all Freemasonry connects you back to the veneration of the cube of Saturn. Why you think the Jews, they put the cube on their head, right? Because what does the cube do? It absorbs microscopic waves of energy to where the archons is able to feed on you by way of belief. That's why the crucifix is a cube. You got the Kaaba and Mecca. All 3 religions have the veneration of the cube, which is Saturn, who is Satan, Chronos, right?
Written a 20-minute speech, which he handed to the Master of Ceremonies to read. And it's actually extremely poignant that he passed away just after this, his last message to the world. Because in it, while he called for peace and an end to conflict in places like Ukraine and the Middle East and so on, he said, today is all about the Easter message. Jesus is alive and Jesus is real. He said, he's not in the tomb.
And this is another thing. This is why our people have to get into linguistics and etymology. When you study the ancient Proto-Semitic language, the G and the J are interchangeable. So when you saying the word Jesus, you're really saying the word Jesus, which is equated to a gas. What is that gas? That gas is non-ether activation, right? Because ether is a noble gas that embodies everything on the periodic table, right? Which is the form of dark matter energy. So that's why you got to understand and stop getting caught up into the words. Jesus is Jesus, which is a gas, and that gas is ether. And it can only be activated by those who have neuromelanin, right? Which I demonstrated in my last transmission when I was talking about the neuromelanin technology.
We look for him in the tomb, but the tomb is empty. He is among us. He is in the face of others. He said, today is a day when light has won over darkness, when good has triumphed over evil, truth has won over falsehoods. That was the message that he gave, the last message to the world.
And here we are the day after the holiest of holidays for Christians in the world, and Pope Francis slips away. Let's start with just the significance of the timing.
I think that obviously it's very significant. It comes the day after Easter, the day after Catholics and Christians around the world celebrate the resurrection of Jesus Christ. But I think more than anything, you saw the Pope on his last day at his happiest. Nothing made Pope Francis happier than being a pastor, than being among his people. It's one of the things that frustrated him, and that's why you saw increasingly during Holy Week these sort of special appearances that he would make at the Basilica, St. Peter's Basilica.
There was some plain chant earlier on. I don't know if you can hear that behind me. I think we're in for a long night of people just coming here to be still, to feel Pope Francis and to feel his presence and to give thanks for a man who really was a world leader in the greatest sense. David?
There is so much of significance going on in the world that totally dominates the media cycle. We're talking interest rate rises, war, politics.
This is something to think about. When I'm looking at all these things, when I look at the grand scheme of everything, you got to think like, why is everybody stepping down? Why is everybody passing away all of a sudden? It could be one of those things where they're disappearing because they know that the final reset or the final sacrifice is going to be taking place, like I said in my last transmission. But these underground bunker systems or whatever, these deep underground military bunker systems, they're not going to work during the process of desolation, right? It seems like everybody's trying to disappear before shit hit the fan.
But believe me, it's all a part of a steady diet of distraction. Now, I say distraction because there are many other things going on that receive next to no public attention, but they really do have the potential to influence your life. Now, some of them involve our regular sparring partners on this program, people or groups like the World Economic Forum and the United Nations. Take, for example, the United Nations. The UN is warning that the world is headed towards a global recession and prolonged stagnation unless we quickly change the current policy course of monetary and fiscal tightening in advanced economies.
When they talking about global warming, when it comes to global warming, all they talking about is the resurrection of human consciousness. Human consciousness has the ability to manipulate physical matter because the consciousness in itself travels on 0-point energy fields. 0-point energy is the reset, right? Because it's starting to shake shit up within the simulation that causes interface transitions. So there is no such thing as no motherfucking global warming. All you seeing is, as you're going to have the fall of the church, you're going to have the rise of spirituality that combats the energy of the moon that put us under the lunar light lock under the Van Allen belt. That is what you call the embodiment of the silver key, right? Which is why they always pass the silver key to a different pope after a pope dies, because the silver key locks the consciousness and keeps it acclimated to the demiurge, right?
Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, it's my great honor to participate for the 8th time at this important meeting, even if only in a virtual way. I would like to express my high respect to His Highness Sheikh Mohammed bin Rashid Al Maktoum for having taken the initiative for creating such an important global platform for governments shaping the future. I also want to congratulate Dubai for having organized such a successful World Expo despite all the repercussions of the global pandemic. Last November, in partnership with His Excellency Mohammed Al-Gargawi, we brought together 60 top intellectual thinkers here in Dubai. Thank you to His Excellency for enabling this initiative to define a longer-term narrative to make the world more resilient, more inclusive, and more sustainable. With all the current issues on our agenda, we tend to forget that we are in the midst of the 4th Industrial Revolution, which accelerates global change in much more comprehensive and faster ways than the previous 3 revolutions. History is truly at a turning point. We do not yet know the full extent and the systemic and structural changes which will happen. However, we do know that global energy systems, food systems, and supply chains will be deeply affected. In times of crisis, the role of governments is more important and more relevant than ever. What is also needed is a summit like this one to go beyond crisis management and to look into constructive ways we can build our common future. Our futures are intrinsically connected to one another. We have to uphold our responsibility, which we have towards the next generation, and which we can only fulfill through collaboration on a national and on a global level. I wish you an impactful and successful meeting.
Those who do not adapt to this 4th industrial revolution will find themselves ousted and will lose. They will lose everything, including their freedom. In short, Klaus Schwab is threatening the head of government of the 20 most industrialized nations in the world to carry out the programmatic points of the Great Reset in their nation. This goes far beyond the pandemic. It is a global coup d'etat against which...
For those who don't know what a global coup d'etat is, a global reset, right? It happens by way during the process of desolation during the time of the 7 thunders, of the 7 tribulation period. So a global coup d'etat is a global reset.
It is essential that people rise up and that the still healthy organ of state start an international juridical process. The threat is imminent and serious. Since the World Economic Forum is capable of carrying out its subversive project, and those who govern nations have all become either enslaved or blackmailed by this international mafia. In the light of these statements, and those of others no less delusional than Yuval Noah Harari, Schwab's advisor, we understand how the pandemic fast served as a trial balloon for imposing controls, coercive measures, curtailing individual freedoms, and increasing unemployment and poverty. The new step will have to be carried out by means of economic and energy crisis, which are instrumental to the establishment of a synarchic government in the hands of the global elite.
See, they scared. They already know what time it is. Put 999 for non-ether activation in the chat, because this is our time right now. This is the time of prophetic divination by way of liberation that's connected to the indigenous people, right? So now we're going to get back to the presentation. Put those nines up in the chat. If you're new to the channel, hit that subscribe button. Now we getting ready to get back to the transmission. Now, so I told you the Pope, I told you he is the visor of all religions. So his death is the symbology of the fall of religion, which is Satan's corporation or Satan's kingdom, right? The world be given to the hands of the wickedness, and his wickedness in high places. Now, it tells you right here. Now, what you're seeing right here in this illustration is showing you these guys were actually black, right? I'm trying to show you the beginning points of why the church has to fall, because the church is an artificial construct. So the guys that you see who are European, this is a false image. These guys actually look like these guys. This is what you call the black nobility who gave the edification to the beast man. But you did have white missionaries on the boat when they came over here on the ship, because it tells you, like most black Indian nations honored matriarchal societies, most black Indian chiefs were women, right? There's a reason for that, right? Because the religion was used to take you out of your sovereign capacity. And it happened and was demonstrated by these entities right here, are the Blackamoor, right? There's a delineation between the Blackamoor and the indigenous Mer. So the fall of religion is the resurrection of these entities that's connected to our bloodline, right? When you're talking about the seeds of Inki, right? Because this is why, like I said, we are not black people. We have a nationality. The word nationality comes from the word nativity. Nativity means birthright. Your birthright, your ethereal cord, is what connects you to the ethereal plane, which makes you indigenous to the land. So the fall of the corporation, as far as the religion that the Pope learned, everything that came from the pontification process came from these entities right here, the black nobility. You have blackamoors who are behind the scenes, who are basically the handlers for the Pope, handlers for the president, handlers for everybody that's controlling industry that's connected to their corporation, right? Because like I said, the corporation must fall. Why is that? Because like I said, the queen, she's also a part of this whole faction as well, because the symbology of her death was the fall of the corporate system. And then you got the fall of the church when you're talking about the Pope, which basically controls everything as far as this blueprint pyramid that shows you about the religion, governments, education. It's all being controlled at the top of these secret societies, but the unseen hand is the hidden eye of the black nobility of what you see behind closed doors. Those are the ones that's controlling the whole pyramid, who is actually the personification of Pindar, when you're talking about the highest supreme archon of the draconian reptilian, but that's a whole different transmission. So you got the 3 city states that represents the corporation, which is the city of London, the Vatican, then you got Washington, D.C. So that London represents the financial system, Vatican represents the religious system, and the military represents Washington, D.C. So when you have the fall of the financial corporate infrastructure system that is controlled by the Federal Reserve, this is where the Queen was taken down. That's why they took the seal off Buckingham Palace, right? Then you got the fall of religion, right? And then the timeline that we're actually on, we don't actually really have a pope, right? Because it's being controlled by the military, which is controlled by FEMA. So all 3 city states has eradicated the corporation. So this is the fall of Satan's kingdom in totality. So it's not a coincidence that everything that's taking place right now is in the 9 year. And the last time that we was in the year of the snake is when the stock market crashed, right? The year of the snake. Because what you got to understand about the Vatican. Now you got the Institute for the Works of Religion that's connected to Vatican City, the Vatican City Bank. They was funneling money to the cartel. They funneled about $2 billion for trafficking, drug trafficking. So that's why I said it's going to destabilize the economic system, because one thing you got to understand about the Vatican Church is being operated by way of the Black Pope, right? Who controls the economic infrastructure that's connected to the Federal Reserve, right? So that's going to destabilize the trafficking industry, human trafficking, drug trafficking, all these things that's connected to their corporations. That's what gives fuel to the stock market, right? Because you also got to understand the inception of the stock market was stockades and bonds, which is bondage of those who they took the land out of their sovereign capacity when they bought maybe about 15% of those Africans over here on those boats, right? But that's a whole different transmission when we get into that. Now, another thing, like I demonstrated today, was the Caritas International Networking System. They are the ones who control the industry of the orphanages and charities and CPS and things of that nature. This is who's running the show as far as like trafficking. So the fall of the Vatican is the end of the deep state shadow government, which is why you see 800,000 people coming up missing on the planet on time, every year, right? That's because they use this Caritas International Networking System. They use it through the Red Cross Foundation, right? This is why they always go all the way to Africa and get those children. And they bring them back to the Vatican for ritualistic purposes, right? They do it all for ritualistic purposes because they know that the blood of the people in that landmass has the ability to bring about these incantations that they propagate in their secret orders. So the fall of religion is going to be the precursor to a major crash, right? One thing you got to understand about America is the #1 spending power on the planet, meaning that we're all about consumerism. Consumerism, this is why we import instead of export. As far as like importing goods, we import maybe about $3.2 billion worth of imports because we consume so much of the materialism that's connected to the construct of America. But we only export maybe about 2.2 billion, right? So that means that we have a $1 billion deficit because, like I said, everything is going to get manipulated. We have a $1 billion deficit that's taking place. So it's inevitable that the system is going to crash in totality, right? Because also, you got to read this book right here, Autonomy. It goes into jurisprudence. It goes into the sovereignty and government, how it's acclimated to the stock market. It goes into sacred geometry. It goes into a multitude of things because it tells us about our Moorish history. This is not a Freemasonic book, even though you see the G at the top. This is actually a book that demonstrates our true identity as people. And shout out to the brother Arcia Ducateers. He hit me up today. He said, our great chairman, Osiris Bey, passed this morning right before Bergoglio. He always said he'd take the Pope's head, and then it happened. We are winning against the war against the beast. Keep up the good work, Noble. And we're at the edge of the event of horizon. Like I said, we're in the time period. Like I said, this is the time of the Great Reset. My whole teaching format actually came from Arcel Duquetiers. That's one of my master teachers, right? Because he understands that Moorish history is acclimated to the timeline. Because a lot of people don't understand that the Moors are connected to the 5 civilized tribes, like I told you, who are the Seminole. And the Seminole is the Semitic people of the Bible who you're talking about, the Negro. It goes into the Washita, Yamansi, Choctaw, not the Cherokee, because the Cherokee is a fake tribe. The Cherokee are the ones who chopped down the cherry tree. So the inception of everything that was connected to their system of democracy, their system of their corporate system, it all came from this faction, the L's, the cosmic lawgivers of the legislation branch. So like I said, there's a delineation between the L and the Bay. A Bay is the governor of the land because we are the title holders of the land. The L's are the blackamoors who sold out that wasn't being industrious, right? That's what it's all about. That's why when you look at a Sears headdress, he'll wear the fez with the feathers, right? Because he understands that it's connected to the Moorish paradigm that was connected to Atlantis, right? It's not coming from these entities who gave the edification to the beast. So the fall of religion is the fall of the economic system. Meet your maker, nigga. It's time for you to go. But, you know, as I also was demonstrating, and I told y'all, human consciousness has the ability to manipulate physical matter. Why is that? Because I told you the carbon body in itself is an electromagnetic generator and a light code transducer. It's the real temple, not no damn church. Your pastor telling you to eat pork in his church and all this other stuff, that's not the true temple. The true temple is actually the Christ body, right? So that means that it's going to manipulate everything in the simulation as far as technology. So you're going to see more planes coming down, right? Because the fall of the church is the activation of the 7 thunders. The 7 thunders can only be activated when your 7 energy cortexes, your chakra system is activated, right? Because the true temple is going to manipulate every damn thing in the simulation. You're going to see more plane crashes, right? And that is also going to be the precursor to the big one, right? The more the consciousness on the planet heats up, is going to create time dilation to where time starts to speed up. And when time speeds up in vibration, that's going to create sedimentary rock formation by way of liquidation of the polar ice caps, right? This is going to cause more sinkholes. And it's happening by way of the consciousness. A lot of people don't understand how consciousness has an ethereal energy to it. Just because you can't see it, don't mean the shit doesn't exist. The more you raise up your mental frequency, it's going to connect you to the mental plane, which is the abode of the Most High, where you stream down intelligence that eradicates everything in third density, as far as the religion, as far as the fashion industry, as far as the music industry, as far as everything. Why you think everything is getting exposed? It's going through reset. It has to go through reset because everything has reached its apex period because we're going through a seculum of a cycle. This is the 4th turning, right? We're at the seculum of a cycle. Hold on for a second. We're at the seculum of a cycle, ladies and gentlemen. So this is why everything has to shift. The food is getting worse. The people are getting worse. Music is getting worse. Everything is getting worse, right? This is why they give you the illusion of progressiveness, because everything in their system is getting worse, right? So everything that I told you that was going to be taking place, because I told you the time of sacrifice happens after the spring equinox, right? Everything happens after the spring equinox. So that's why you're going to see more sacrifices going to be taking place. That's why I said he's going to pass away after the spring equinox. Not a coincidence. I put this out 3 weeks ago. The prophecy of popes and of 2027 and the revealing of the black nobility. The next pope is going to be a black one, but he been at the Vatican the whole time, right? He was already inside the Vatican because he was the Pope's handler. And then you got the BlackRock, the people who bought BlackRock. It was some people out in Africa, but those are the handlers of the whole shebang of the black nobility. The handlers are going to start to reveal themselves. That's why you can't get caught up in colorism. Now, we're going to get to some Q&A. If you got some questions about this transmission, I want to hit me up with some questions because, you know, I know a lot of y'all been waiting on me to go live to get some questions answered. So if you got a question, put it with the super chat if you got a super chat, or if you don't have super chat, you can just send it to me by way of Cash App or whatever the case, whatever you do. Because you have to do that by way of the law of reciprocity. Energy expands and returns to itself. So if I don't receive your donation, I'll be blocking your blessings. So if you got some questions, hit the chat up. All right, let's see. I just seen one. Okay. Mark Lewis, what happens when you have a nationality mixed with bloods? Everybody who got a drop of black blood is actually correlated to the timeline of those who are liberated, you know, by way of the land. When you're talking about the black, not the black nobility, but those who are the Semitic people of the Bible. The Semitic people of the Bible is the Negro. The Negro are the Native American, who are the indigenous ones that's connected to this land. So if you have a drop of black blood, I think that was talking about the great debauchery process. Even Bobby Hemmett and Rod Hayes goes into that whole ideology. The one drop rule, yes. That's like I said, you got to read this book right here called Astronomy. If you want to know anything about Moorish history, Moorish science, and how it's connected to the Native Americans, this book is going to get you together. This is one of the best books I ever read. I always read this book as a reference point as far as when you get into civics. So this is a really good book to read, right? And goes into the hairdressers, but let's get to some more questions. Let me see. Moors are not black nobility. Like I said, you have a diametrical difference between a black Moor and an indigenous Mer. The indigenous Mers is connected to the 5 civilized tribes, and the black Moors are the ones that took you out of your sovereign capacity, who gave the knowledge to the beast. That's why in Dr. York's publication, he said the evil reptilian gave power to the beast. He said the reptilian, because the faction and the bloodline of the black nobility are connected to the Nephilim, right? Who are black shapeshifters. So let's get into another question. Can you say the name? The book is called Astronomy. Astronomy. It's not a Freemasonic book. This book exposes Freemasonry. So don't get caught up into the symbolism of the book. The Pope been dead, right? They've been dead ever since they've been coming out with the whole scandal talking about those little people coming up missing that was a part of that parlor. I don't want to say the word on here because, like I said, you can't say too much about it. But he's been passed away. Let me see. Let me see if we got a super chat question. No. All right, y'all. It's time to ask some questions. Y'all been wanting to ask some questions. It's time to hit the questions up. They're not actually, during the process of, I think during the time we was in pandemic, a lot of those $5 Indians, they was getting evicted off their reservations because they're not bloodline connected to that geographical area. So they ain't stealing shit. Everything right now is getting returned. That's why he had to return the Cosmic Keys. I'm not sure if this is connected to the Ryan's Gate portal, but I know that the symbology of the number 88 represents breaking from the time analysis mechanism, which is the fixed position reality that keeps you stuck inside the matrix, right? So we breaking out of the infinity loop. Shout out to New Diamonds. Shout out to everybody in the chat. Hit that 999 in the chat for the 9 ether activation. Let me see if we get some more questions. All right. See, everybody got to understand, you don't become a Moor, you're already an indigenous Mer. When you look at your hands, you got the M's right there. You got 306 degrees of the physical plane, physical knowledge, 306 degrees of spiritual knowledge. That is equated to 720 degrees of knowledge. 7 plus 2 plus 0 is 9 ether activation, right? So you're already a Moor. So this is why you can't get caught up into paperwork, because you can't fight paperwork with paperwork. So you don't have to go get your nationality. The nationality in itself is already acclimated to who you are by way of bloodline. So when you see the fall of the corporate system, that's going to resurrect who you are as a physical entity, a human, right? Right. So this is why you got to read the Declaration of Human Rights, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, because it connects you right back in to the Indigenous People Act, right? Let's see. First of all, like I said, Pepe Orsini, he's the great pope. Now, he may have more power than the black pope and the white pope at the same time, but you cannot negate science. What I mean by that, you can't negate science, because when you study microbiology and genealogy, you get the recessive from the dominant. You don't get the dominant from the recessive. So who is the one who gave Pepe Orsini and that Canaanite bloodline? Who was the ones who gave them the edification on how to run the system? Who gave them that power? It's people who look like us who are not us. That's why I said the black nobility is the hidden hand that you don't see. So Pepe Orsini is not at the top of the hierarchy chain when you're talking about having command on the planet, right? There is no Europeans controlling anything that's connected to the demiurge. These archonic forces who control black nobility are actually so-called black people. The key's been, when I'm talking about the silver and the golden key, you have those two alignments of January 21st and February 28th that took place. That was the silver key and the golden key being unlocked. That's why the Pope, when he went on New Year's Eve, he used the keys of papacy and he unlocked the galactic center. The unlocking of the galactic center is getting rid of the metaphysical restrictor of the pineal gland, which is why they have a pine cone at the Vatican archives, right? So the unlocking of that energy was the unlocking of the Christ body. You cannot unlock the Christ body unless you step away from religion, because religion is what keeps you metaphysically confined to their system, right? Hold on, I'm about to get to y'all's questions here in a second. Oh, shit. Hold on for a second. It was something I was looking for, but I can't find it. All right. We're going to get back to y'all. Let me go get to y'all questions. All right, let me see. I've seen a lot of references to Switzerland and saltwater. Well, Switzerland is actually the home of the black nobility. It's one of the only places on the planet that never had a war. And there's maybe about 5,000 bunker systems in Switzerland or whatever, because like I said, that's the home of the black nobility, and that's the true place of where the CIA is at. Not the ones in the Americas, right? Well, let me see what we got. What else we got? The chat is, let me see. Now, see, one thing you got to understand about, everything that's taking place. We're in solar cycle 25, right? So this is where this is going to come into play. This is why they're talking about global warming, right? One thing you got to understand about the Indo-European, right? Everybody is not connected to the faction of the Canaanite. Just because you see a person who is so-called white, they're not. Everybody's white is not a Canaanite. Everybody is not a part of that bloodline. But there is a faction of a bloodline who you're talking about, the blue-eyed beast, the one that was cursed with leprosy. When you go to the book of Romans, the book of Leviticus, when you go to the book of Numbers, these are all law books to give the edification to where they was, basically civilized. And they got that civilized energy from black nobility. That's why you got to read these books, man, because everything is connected. Let me see. Okay. I like this, whatever he said, if there are no more reincarnation cycles. Well, one thing you got to understand about the process of, you got to understand the diametrical difference between non-ether and 6-ether. Non-ether can be subjugated by 6-ether by way of the moon. That's how a so-called black person can be subjugated by way of, the process of inversion by following everything that was connected to their system. That keeps you confined. That keeps you stuck in a box mentally. There's a firmament over the brain and there's a firmament over the planet. So in order to keep you confined, they have to give you the religion. They got to make you go to work. They got to make you do everything outside of yourself. Why you think that everything that's connected to their system is a form of a patrilineal system, the embodiment of patriarchy, right? It used to be one point in time, your ass is able to go outside and get some fruit and pull it from a tree. But because of patriarchy, now you got to go to the store, right? Because patriarchy is a masculine energy that subjugates the matriarch. It subjugates nature. That's why 98% of the trees on the planet are actually male trees, right? So Mother Nature, the fall of religion, the fall of the corporate system is nature getting her shit back. And nature's going to give her shit back to the people who belong to the planet. That's what this is all about. So the reincarnation cycle, 6-ether, dissipates into nothingness, right? There is no ascension for anything that's connected to 6-ether, because when you understand the inception of the planet, it was a sun cycle. There wasn't no moon cycle, right? The moon was told into our solar system, right? Because like I said, all these religious doctrines and everything, as far as Easter, pagan holidays, these are all moon energies. We're not moon people. Hello? The moon is connected to the Van Allen belt. The moon is the external hard drive of the planet Earth. The moon is what controls you on an energetic level, right? That's why the fall of religion is actually moonfall. The moon is not actually going to fall, because when you're talking about moonfall, it's the end of their world that's connected to the Piscean age. So this is the transitional shift that everybody's talking about. You transition from the age of Aquarius back to Libra, right? The Libra age is the true golden age, because this is the embodiment of reset, balanced energies, right? That's why when you go into court, the scales of justice is off balance. That's how you create polarity in a system, by way of inversion and giving you the illusion of progressiveness. Let me see if we got some more questions. I always like it. Always, why does it seem like families, lineages are taken out, especially on planes? That's because they're trying to hide something. The same reason why you seen the plane crashes is the same reason why the Titanic sunk. I'm going to say it again. The same reasons why you see the plane crashes is why the Titanic sunk. Why is that? Because when the Titanic sunk, the handlers that was connected to that boat, that's during the time when we had a gold standard. This, because if you notice, after the stock market crash, that's when they turned humans into humanoid real estate because it wasn't backed by no money. So they got rid of the people that was, controlling the economic system during that time period, because after the Titanic sunk, that's when they created the Federal Reserve, right? That is connected to the Rothschilds. So the same thing is actually taking place with the airplanes, right? Because we're going back to the gold standard once the stock market crashes. It has to crash. The system has to crash, right? Why you think they coming out with everything? We only 4 months in. They done told your ass about there's actual, chambers, adept chambers that lead to hollow earth in the pyramids of Giza. They telling you about the Ark of the Covenant. They giving you full disclosure. You got these drones. The Pope just died. He just gave back the keys of papacy. You think all this is a coincidence? It's leading up to something. It's leading up to the big one, right? I don't know if it's going to be an earthquake. I don't know if it's going to be a grid shutting down, but it's leading up to something. Full disclosure, full spectrum. We ain't had none of this like the past, like in the last 10 years, in the 2010s or whatever. None of this stuff wasn't happening. Everything is starting to happen because they got to speed everything up, because the propagation of Trump's administration eradicates the whole process of democracy. But if he's not doing it because he wants to, he has to. That's how they reset their karma under the threefold law. Hold on for a second. Let me get to the regular chat. Let me get these questions. I don't know how long we're gonna be on here tonight. So if you got some questions to ask me, just ask me. I got all the time in the world tonight. We got time tonight because this is a celebration. It's the fall of the corporation. We got to celebrate that shit, even though we know he been dead. He been dead. Is it true that people are not seeing the light? I'm not sure about that, but the light is the false light. And the false light is the embodiment of a holographic projection that is being projected by the technology on the dark side of the moon. That's why I told you that when you look at on top of the cube of Saturn, it has a hexahedron. When you look at the prefix of the word hexahedron, you get hex. A hex is a form of a curse. You can curse energies inside. You can basically entrap that energy inside of a hexahedron. So when people die, their soul is extracted into the binary code system of the dark side of the moon, the supercomputer, and then they project it inside the hexahedron. Because what is Saturn? It's a gas planet, right? Saturn is a gas planet. Anybody that's following the traditional ways of the old system by way of, oral traditions and stuff, as far as Caribbean people, yes, those are indigenous too. Those are indigenous people too on the plane crash. Yeah, I already broke that down already. Now, the great solar flash is going to happen when you have the galvanization of the 144,000 by way of cosmic convergence. So 144,000, like I said, when you look at the number, you get the number 9. 9 is the highest number in the universe, right? And it also represents completion. So when you have that 9 ether activated, it manipulates everything in the space-time continuum in the cosmos, because you're pulling intelligence from the mental plane, which is the magnetosphere, where you get your magnetism from. So the magnetism of your physiology is going to enhance by way of coherence when you have the Schumann resonance activated. That is the heartbeat of planet Earth, because it's going to go from 7.83 megahertz frequency to 13.13 megahertz frequency. That's the Queen Mother seed. Let me see. Somebody sent a question on Cash. Okay, let me see. Sorry about that. Let me get to the questions on Cash App real quick. I don't see the question, brother. Let me see. Now, this is why a lot of people got to get into a lot of the everything as far as like Gaia and places like that or whatever, as far as like the information. Their form of UFOlogy is actually a form of, it's acclimated to a form of racism because they don't see the whole thing full spectrum. They only tell it from a one-sided perspective, right? Which is why they always propagate the Pleiadians or whatever. The Anunnaki, you got to understand what the word means. The Anunnaki means those sent by Anu to Ki. Ki means Kai. Kai means planet Earth. So the Anunnaki, they were sent by Anu, who is Theos. Theos is actually Thanos when you're talking about Marvel. Theos is the true name, or El Elyon El. You got to read Dr. York's publication called Holy Tablets, right? Freedom Master Teacher. So the word Anunnaki is those sent by Anu to Ki, right? That's what Anunnaki, but you got two different factions. You got agreeable ones and you got disagreeables. Everything as far as like third density, everything that's connected to the Earth zone of the Milky Way star constellation, everything operates in polarity. So there's always going to be a good faction and a negative faction. Just like you have bad Pleiadians and you have Ashtar Command. Ashtar Command do the bidding of the Draconian reptilians through the Majestic 12, who work with insectoids, right? That's a whole different other transmission. So don't get caught up into the tricknology of places like, Gaia. They only tell their story from one side. They don't never talk about black people having extraterrestrial genes and how we got, 172 alien genes. They don't never talk about stuff like that, but they only tell you a one-sided perspective. So Lyrians are also connected to us as well. They even show you through the halls of Kemet. Let me see. Certain types of cords. It depends. I mean, if you're in the elite, yeah, certain, a lot of stuff like that can happen. But as far as like if you got a nationality and you know who you are and you're trying to step away from the, the jurisdiction of the United States corporation. But the only way the inception of that is to get away from paperwork in itself is to have a home birth, right? You have a home birth to where you record it as a deed or a title. You don't sign no deed or titles because one thing you got to understand about the Vatican, right? The Vatican, this is why I said the fall of religion is the end of the corporate system, because the Pope's death is the symbology of the fall of the financial slavery system that they created, because the Vatican, they hold all the archives and the titles to all our birth certificates, right? And on the birth certificate, it has the QSIP number, which is Community Uniform Security Identification Procedure. Those QSIP numbers get traded on Wall Street. So the fall of the Vatican is the fall of the stock market. Just wait for it. Wait for it. Because like I said, the Pope is a representation of, that's really the chess piece. The queen was the queen on the chessboard, but the king, when the king dies, everything ends. The whole game of chess is over, right? The whole thing is over. So this is now shit going to get really weird, and this is where you're going to see a lot of psychological operations going to be taking place. A lot of them. And the reason that is because the deep state shadow government, they on their last leg. Okay. Now, I wouldn't say American government because America has always had governments. We matriarchal energies, we always had governments. Now, how do you step away from the United States corporation? One thing you gotta understand about the word United States of America, that little word of denotes ownership over a certain demographic of people because they don't have a nationality. So in order to, you also gotta go into the Uniform Commercial Code, Title 18, Section 3002, page 86, third paragraph. It tells you that the United States is a corporation. America is not. America is a country. The United States is a corporation, right? That's what you must understand. So in order to separate yourself from the corporation, it's like I said, you got to do it from the inception of birth. Stop taking your kids to the damn doctor or whatever whenever you're pregnant or whatever. Stop going to the doctor, have a home birth. That's how you reverse the polarity. Because now they're not trading your life on Wall Street. Let me see. The final sacrifice, will it be kills the people of the collective? No, the final sacrifice is going to happen because you're going to have a certain people on a planet, a certain faction who are stuck in a certain mindset. When you have a certain faction of people stuck in a certain mindset, that's going to keep them at a low vibrational state. Now, I like to bring up movie references or whatever. The movie Alien versus Predator, with the Predator, he always had this ability to see vibration. He didn't see people. He seen energies. So this is why I said you must get your physiology in order to where you're able to balance out your chakra system. Because if you're connected to the lower chakra systems, when the final sacrifice happens, that's when the entities come from the abyss and eradicate everything that's basically on a low vibrational state. If you're not harmonizing from the green chakra above, you're not going to have ascension rights, right? Because like I said, that's connected to the map of consciousness. You got to you got to break out of the box mentally, right? You're not going to get to the fifth dimension just because your ass got on crystals, right? That is a part of the materialistic construct. Just because you got crystals, it's all about mentalism. Do you have the ability to decipher good from evil, right? Do you know when you're being tricked? That's what spirituality is all about. It's about not being tricked. It's not about just because you got on a scarf today and some head wraps and you meditated 30 minutes. I mean, it takes a mental process to do that, meditation for 30 minutes or however long or whatever. But at the same time, you're not gonna get ascension rights if your heart ain't right. Right? The heart and the mind has to be balanced. That's Mayat. That's Tahuti. Right? That is the spirit of Melchizedek. Why you think Kanye came out and said what he said about what he did when he was 14 years old? Right? He tweeted because he's going through a process of self-realization. Self-realization is healing. If you don't heal, that's going to be a manifestation blocker. If you don't heal, it's going to put an encryption on your chakra system. So in order to get to the higher levels of consciousness, to where these entities don't eat you, you got to look your motherfucking self in the mirror and come to terms with your own shortcomings and fuck ups, right? Because if you don't do that, what's going to happen is you're going to be food for the gods, right? You're going to be food for the draconian overlords who are archonic forces, right? That's why you must heal. This is why a lot of people, who fell victim, to stardom in the spiritual community and they fell from grace. That's because they didn't do their shadow work and then they just stepped right into esoteric knowledge. Motherfucker, you got to heal yourself before you get into the higher levels of consciousness. You can't go from, you could during that time period, you go from high school to the NBA, but you can't do it like that. There's a process at hand that takes place to where you become a master. Right? That's why I believe in delayed gratification. Delayed gratification is the frequency of God. Anything that's connected to instant gratification is the frequency of the devil because it doesn't have any temporal power. Let me see. So the collective consciousness there's going to be more events, and I will definitely tell people what's going on when we have another one. I keep everybody updated. Send some more questions because I'm got to talk and I ain't seen everything. I'm eventually going to come out with a video and I'm going to demonstrate on what you can do to heal, right? There's a process at hand. Just because, like I said, it has nothing to do with wearing, jewelry, crystals and all this other stuff. It has nothing to do with that. Hold on. The final sacrifice won't affect children because children, they have the ability to connect with the abode of nothingness, right? Because a lot of them, a lot of children, they can see auras and energies too. But like I said, they automatically have ascension rights because they don't have the mental faculties to decipher what's good and what's evil. But you do, your ass do. Y'all know going to church is bad and you still go, right? Doing all these things that's connected to the material world, it's bad and you still do it. Children they don't have the ability to decipher that, so they automatically get ascension rights, right? Let me see. Y'all got any questions that's connected to anything as far as the Pope passing away? I want to get to some of those type of questions. What do you feel caused your spiritual awakening? Well, the inception of my spiritual awakening, I think I was pretty much always tapped in because I used to watch, certain movies. I used to watch a lot of end of the world movies when I was a child. And I used to tell my dad all the time, I can't wait till the world ends. I always wanted this shit to end. And we in that time period. I was always tapped in. And then my biological mother, I had Dr. York's publications, early age. So I was already pretty much tapped in. Let me see. No, the queen, she actually has a lot more access and, flexibility than the king. The game is not over until the king dies. That's why when you look at the chess piece of the king, it shows the crucifix at the top on some chess games or whatever. On traditional chess games or whatever, the chess piece at the top, it has a crucifix because the fall of the religion is the fall of their corporate system. Let me see. I cannot see everybody's chats. The chat going way too fast. There is going to be a black pope. I demonstrated that in the Prophecy of Popes video. You got to watch that video because it's connected to everything that I'm basically saying tonight. So everything right now is, like I said, it's checkmate. The game is over. Now, like I said, we still in the time of sacrifice too. It goes all the way up until May 21st. This is the time of sacrifice. Why you think they had that shooting? All shootings and stuff like that, all type of attacks, all that stuff happens during the time of the spring, after the spring equinox. Let me see. Now, I'm glad you asked me this because, like I said, this is a good book to read. Even though it was written by a Hebrew Israelite, but you can still get edification from it, even though I don't, follow that whole doctrine or whatever. You just take what you can and what you can out of the book or whatever. But when it comes to so-called white people, like I said, you got to understand bloodlines. You got to understand who are the Druids, who are the Amorites, who are the Canaanites, who are the Girgashites, right? Anything that has a cursed physiology doesn't have a soul, right? So one of the seeds of the Canaanites is the fourth seed, who is the Girgashite. The Girgashite is connected to the biological structure of the pig because the pig was grafted out of the fourth seed of the Girgashite. So this is why, you know, you see certain people that's connected to the demographic of so-called whites or whatever. You can put a pig heart inside of a Canaanite. That's a fact. You can take a pig heart and put it inside of a Canaanite because they have the same antigens, right? They don't have O-type blood. So this is why you can put our hearts inside anybody, but we can't take a Mongoloid, we can't take anybody else's hearts because, like I said, the heart is actually the seat of the soul, right? Why you think they need our organs so bad? The heart is the seat of the soul when you get into ancient Kemetic spirituality. But the soul enters the body through the pineal gland, but it's the seat of the soul. You have to be balanced here. That's why in the halls of Kemet, they tell you that you cannot get access to ascension rights if your heart is not light as a feather, right? So as far as like Canaanites do not have a soul. That's why it's imperative you're a European, study your bloodline to see what bloodline you came from. Just because you're European don't mean you're a Canaanite. Not everybody's Canaanites. You got to study the bloodlines. I seen something about the Chronos Visor. Let me get up here to it. I definitely want to talk about that. Now, there is a technology inside the Vatican called the Chronos Visor. Now, when you look at the prefix of the word chrono, it means chronos, to manipulate the fixed position reality, to where you break out of the artificial time analysis mechanism, because chrono is what controls time by way of chronology. So when you're talking about the Chronos Visor, we have the same capabilities to do it. Now, this technology in the Vatican can manipulate the space-time continuum by going from the past, present, and the future. We have the ability to do that. They showed your ass in the movie, the movie Sinners that came out. When Tommy, when he was playing the guitar, he had the ability to manipulate space and time, right? Because one thing you got to understand about instruments, the word instrumental, mental, the suffix of the word, it has the ability to activate the ethereal energy. Ether can manipulate space and time, right? So that means that everything as far as like westernized technology, everything that's connected to their system, we have those same capabilities. But like I said, you cannot unlock those abilities until you step away from the religion. But there is a device inside the Vatican called the Chronos Visor. They have that technology. Let me see. We not getting into those them type of questions, Shalonda. We can't talk about that. If you're new to the channel, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, hit that notification bell, all that. And if, like I said, if you're new to the channel, you can also follow me on Instagram if you got questions. I'm gonna start doing consultations, free ones. I don't care about people paying me money to talk to me. Everybody who's talked to me in real time, they know I would just give. Sometimes depends on the energy. I would give you my number and we can chop it up for free. But you know, so follow me on Instagram too, BDELL1014. If you got questions, and you can hit me up in the chat. BDELL, now that the Pope is gone. BDELL, now that the Pope is gone, what is next? I told you. The fall of religion is the activation of the Christ body. When the Christ body is activated, it has an intrinsic amount of ether that manipulates everything in the simulation. So that's going to be the precursor to the seven thunders, right? The seven thunders, when you're talking about the Hopi prophecy. And then it goes all the way down to the fifth or the sixth thunder. And they said that four great people will perish, right? So you just had the Pope fall. You got the Queen gone. There's two other people, you know what I'm saying, the fall of the synthetic forms of the four horsemen, right? When they fall, that's when you're going to get the activation of the seven thunders. That's desolation. The seven thunders is the seven plagues. The seven plagues is the seven tribulation period, or the seven bowls, right? Because like it's talking about us. You have seven energy cortex. You have seven chakra systems. Your scroll of all. Your scroll of all is a certain consciousness that manipulates physical matter, dark matter energy. That's why, like I said, we in solar cycle 25, because when that motherfucking melanin turn on, that's when shit really gonna hit the fan, because it's gonna contain an orgone energy. Orgone energy has the ability to manipulate the weather, right? That's why we got to start getting back outside and start dancing, right? Dancing, because dancing in itself is connected to the law of vibration. The law of vibration enhances the ether and enhances the magnetism, right? But you got to be doing it for a greater purpose. You can't just be twerking and all because your ass want to turn up. Twerk because you want to reset this whole thing. Do it for that at least. Twerk for the Most High. Twerk for the non-ether activation. Let me see. We're going to get into a couple more questions and then we're going to end the transmission. Okay. What are some things you have to do to vibrate high? Work out. Read. Because like I said, if you work out more than you read, your ass is still out of shape. So you got to be balanced. You got to balance your energies. Because when you giving your energy to all these things, you got all this stuff pulling on your energy, it's going to lower the frequency of your magnetism. When your magnetism is too low, that's when you're going to get non-corporeal entities can attach themselves to your nervous system or your solar plex, and they're able to control you. So you got to be balanced while we're in solar cycle 25. That's the key to non-ether activation. That's the key to vibrating at a high vibrational frequency. And you also got to stay away from low vibrational ass family members and low vibrational friends. People in exes, they want to keep you stuck in a time loop, right? You have to deviate from certain people on your spiritual journey. Because when you deviate from certain people on your spiritual journey, that's when you become the catalyst, and when you turn your tinfoil hat into a crown of knowledge, right? You're going to turn your tinfoil hat into a crown of knowledge because you see beyond the illusion. You ain't like these people in your city. You ain't like your mom, your dad, or whatever, even though they brought you into this simulation. But at the same time, you know the energy is different. You know you ain't like your brother and sister. You know you thinking at a high vibrational frequency. You know you see shit differently than everybody else. So that's why I said, if you want to vibrate high, you know, you got to step away from certain people that's going to bring your vibrations low. People, places, and possessions. You got to learn how to be a loner, right? But like I said, a lot of people, they don't have the ability to be alone because they're in a state of fear. And everything you want in this world is on the other side of fear. So when you eradicate the fear, that's when you start to manipulate timelines and start to make shit move in your life. That's how you do that. You got to be balanced mentally. You can't be so impulsive. Because when you're impulsive, that's when you supplicate your emotions and it becomes a weakness. So you got to be strong mentally. Let me see. There's a lot of questions in here. I can't see. We're going to get into a couple more questions, then we're going to end the transmission. Okay. I think I got one. BDELL does wearing sunscreen while exercising block conscious. Yeah, you definitely don't want to do that. You know what I'm saying? That's the problem with black people now, so-called black people. Y'all don't even want to get black no more because, like I said, it's going to enhance the melanin. What is melanin? You got to understand the neuromelanin activation. It's the brain's central nervous system melanin that creates melanocytes. Those melanocytes, when it hits the epidermis layer of the skin, those coronal mass ejections, that's going to convert the light into bioelectricity. That's natural ether. So why would you want to block the transmission of the sun? Stop wearing all these damn hair hats. Stop wearing all these weaves and synthetic, hair garments on your head. You blocking the transmission, right? That's how you connect with God, because that's your antenna to the cosmos. Why would you want to block that, right? That is your ethereal cord, right? That's what makes you non-ether, because like I said, the hair follicle in itself is connected to the energy of the brain. So stop blocking that transmission. We in solar cycle 25. So like I said, we in the fourth turning. So where you have a high, an awakening, then you have a crisis, and then you have an unraveling, right? Everything is getting unraveled by way of the DNA sequence that's connected to the energy of the sun, right? Originally, the 24 strands of DNA, but we are operating. Yes. But like I said, that happens by way of resurrection. You got to understand that the activation of the X gene is what's going to turn you into an X-man, to where it's going to activate those telomeres that's connected to those chromosomes and those DNA strands. So this is where you get the epigenetic body working in harmony with the subconscious mind. That is your Akashic records, right? Everybody on the phone trying to talk to AI, talking about Akashic records and stuff like that, that's cool. But you can do that shit yourself neurologically. You don't need AI. AI need you. That's why I said when you study Gnosticism, Gnosticism is the fact that artificial intelligence don't have the ability to create. So they need to mimic human behavior in order to become sentient. That's why I don't give my veneration and credence and all that other stuff to artificial intelligence, because everything that artificial intelligence can do, we can already do that shit, right? We can already do it. That's why the archons, they use technology as a catalyst. I told you in my last transmission talking about neuromelanin and artificial intelligence, when you break down the etymology of the word ball, his other nomenclature title is electricity. So that's how you know that archonic forces can travel through oscillating signals and control human behavior by way of the stemmo receivers or the neurolinks, right? They need Neuralink because they don't got neuromelanin. I used to listen to 13 Son when I was in middle school. I was watching his videos when I was in 7th grade. Shout out to the 13 Son. But most of this stuff that I've said about the hair is actually in Dr. Malachi Z. York's book. I'm not sure if he's a follower of him, but the foundational blueprint of the message comes from Noble Jew Ali and Dr. Malachi Z. York. Those are my sources right there. But matter of fact, I'm gonna show y'all some. I'm gonna give y'all some publications that'll get y'all together real quick. Let me get a couple books real quick. All right, this is what we got. I'm only going to pull a few of them out. But like I said, the fall of the corporation is getting the land back. The fall of the church is getting the land back. You got to read this book. You see, I've had this book since I was in high school. Look, it's falling apart. It's called The Lost Continent of Mu. You got to read this book because it talks about Atlantis. It talks about the people that was connected to that land. Then you got to get this book right here. You want to learn anything about the basic keys of knowledge of talking about melanin, get this book right here by Baba Lawrence. It's going to give you like the basic edification that you need as far as like, melanin activation. You got to read this right here. This is going to give you the keys on how to be industrious, right? On how to be civil and righteous at the same time. So it's going to give you the divine instructions on how to ascend on this planet, right? To where you're able to, harmonize with the planet. Even though, like I said, people don't like this book right here, written by Robert Greene, but it's a form of mastery, even though it's coming from a imperialistic construct. But that publication is, is going to give you the keys on how to master yourself. This right here, like I said, if you don't believe in anything that I'm saying, if I got Christians in the chat, this is the book to where your ass is going to step away from the religion, the destruction of a black civilization, right? Because all our civilization in the inception of time was, it was all matriarchal. We didn't have no patriarchal energies, right? We had matriarchal governments. Another book that you can read is They Came Before Columbus, right? By Ivan Van Sertima. You got to read books, man. Because like I said, the books is what's going to put you in alignment to what's going on. Because you got to understand everything in full spectrum. You can't just stop at, oh, I want to just want to read the Bible and Yahweh is the true Lord and not Anu and all this other stuff. You got to read every pillar of knowledge. I got a satanic Bible. I got it all. Because in order to understand what's going on, you got to study the enemy, right? You got to read their books too. You can't be one-dimensional when it comes to the knowledge. How you going to defeat the beast if you don't understand civics, right? How you going to defeat the beast and you still calling yourself black? You can't uplift fallen humanity if your ass is on the floor with them. Make that make sense? So we're going to get one more question in and down the, let me see. Of course they got melons, but no, they do. Like I said, this book right here, The Melanin, the basic key to the knowledge of self. Hold on, I lost the question, but everybody on the planet has melanin, but everybody doesn't have neuromelanin. That's what you must understand. Everything on the planet has melanin. You got to understand the 7 principles of creation, right? It's plant, animal, protoplast, man, mankind, cherubim, and seraphim, right? So there's a delineation between man and mankind. Mankind is a kind of a man that was genetically spliced. So everything that contains a protoplast has melanin, but everything on the planet doesn't have neuromelanin. You have to be of a certain bloodline. Let me see. One more question. I swear I'm out of here. This is why I don't go live that much, because I find myself being on here longer than what I'm supposed to. All right, this is a good one to end. The black nobility, galactically, they're connected to the faction of the archons. Archons are Draconian reptilian. Draconian reptilian are cherubim. The cherubim are the 200 fallen angels of the Bible when you go to the book of Enoch that fell in Mount Hermon. That is 1/3 of the galaxy that went against the orders of Anu, right? So when they fell, that's when they created the blacks in the Caucasus, right? Who are the Colochians. So the first Canaanite were actually black Canaanites, right? And a lot of them were vampiric, because you got to look at the word cannibalism, Canaanite cannibalism, because cannibalism in itself is a veneration of Baal, which is human sacrifice, right? Baal worship is human sacrifice by way of cannibalism. So that's why, everything in a food industry that's connected to those cemeteries, why you think that happens? Why you think all them cemeteries and all those people come up missing? Because like I said, you live in a demonic system. Everything's inverted. So everything that's connected to their corporate system comes from the black nobility to invert the lifestyles to keep you at a low vibrational state. But Like I said, if you're new to the channel, hit that like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell so you can understand what's going on. If you got other questions that I didn't get to tonight, ask me on Instagram at BDELL1014. And thanks for watching this video. End of transmission. Oh.
Me on the ladder to the land. Karma's gonna get to you and then you'll have a chariot with only one less friend. Now I had distant folks that are looking to my eyes to understand the wisdom he's given and his wealth from the skies. So thanks for this meal that I'm about to receive, and thank you for my health and all the good memories. Thanks for the courage taking on another day. When I used to not believe, but now I know about grace. Stay away from the fire, cause the flames does burn. Go with your gut feeling. When it's wrong, you learn. For every one step I take, the Lord takes two. And do unto others if you want it done unto you. It's me again, God. I know it's been a long time since I last called you back on your line. So I hope and I pray for your hand to help me on the ladder to the land. It's me again, God. I know it's been a long time since I last called you back on your line. So I hope and I pray for your hand to help me on the ladder to the land. This a completion, the selfish Proto-Grecian, Amerindian, Phoenician. I'm the last of the Mohicans, the bastard of the land, the pen, melanin, accretion. And we just trying to get back to the fact that we was kings and queens of a land before the avalanche seized it. I live on Turtle Island with the rest of the diseased. Better than the medicine for 7 different treatments. You try to ride away but end up getting seasick. The sleep can feel my words like Braille, and they're awakened with the penmanship of Hindu script written in them vacant monastery honorary payments to the prototype. Tomorrow's only a day away, but nothing happens overnight. The fuck's wrong with going left when you know it's right? Biting off more than I can chew, that's an overbite. Black on black crime is like watching 2 soldiers fight when all along they was on the same page. History. It's me again, God. I know it's been a long time since I last called you back on your line. So I hope and I pray for your hand to help me on the ladder to the land. It's me again, God. I know it's been a long time since I last called you back on your line. So I hope and I pray for your hand to help me on the ladder to the land.